A lot of people will say that during the housing crisis that we've had here in this decade, that houses will never rise without jobs. This is the main objection in the future housing boom. They say real estate can never rise without jobs. You have to have jobs to qualify for loans. But we see very clearly that during the dot-com bubble in 2000, March 2000, April 2000, through March of 2003, for 3 years we had increased unemployment, and real estate went up every single one of those years. And so the job market didn't have an impact because real estate was oversold and it was on the upswing. Construction was doing very well during that time. And so some very astute person will say, oh, well, that's because they were lowering interest rates. But we see that the 1970s, the decade from 1970 to 1980, we see that this disproves a lot of the objections that people have. And when we look at this, in the 1970, interest rates were 4.5%, and they rose to 21% over that decade. So interest rates more than quadrupled, and unemployment went from 3.5% to 10.5%. So unemployment tripled, and interest rates more than quadrupled. And during the decade of the 1970s, the U.S. Census Bureau recorded the 1970s as having the biggest price jump of any decade last century. And the reason for this was they were printing money. In 1971, Nixon went off the gold standard because France gave us $100 million, and we gave them back $100 million of gold, and gold was like $30 an ounce, so we gave them a lot of gold for that $100 million. And so Nixon said, that's it, we're off the gold standard. And he went off the gold standard to continue justifying printing money. And so they were printing $12 million of cash a day at the beginning of the 70s and $16 million of cash a day at the end of the 70s. And there wasn't any inflation when they were printing at the beginning of the 70s, the end of the 60s and 70s. There wasn't really any inflation. We had oil and gold go up a little. But essentially, in 73 and 74, we had the oil embargo, and still prices wouldn't go up. And so it wasn't until 1975 when the banks sold off the last foreclosure, and then 76 we had another housing boom, and the government raised rates to slow down the rise in housing. And lo and behold, all the banks and all the businesses loaned money. And when they injected that money that they had been hoarding, that they weren't loaning, when they injected that money in the economy through the form of new home loans, we had massive inflation. In fact, real estate in California went up 10 times in price. And I remember an aunt of mine buying a house for $30,000, and it jumped 23 times in price. It went up to $700,000. And so I'm saying that real estate will go up a lot between 2016 and 2015. They'll solve the last foreclosure. 2016 on, we'll have a massive home price, and it won't be because of unemployment, and it won't be because of interest rates. It will be because of the money that was printed. And so this, looking at the 1970s, is actually the decade we should be looking at. A lot of people are making mistakes, even economists. They're looking at 2006 and they're saying, oh, well, the higher interest rates, that stalled housing. But that's only at a market peak. We see that in 2000, we had the dot-com bubble. Interest rates were at 10-year highs. In 2007, we were at 6-year highs in interest rates. And but we do see the 1970s debunks the theory that higher interest rates or higher unemployment will stall housing, because housing made the biggest price jump of the 1970s when the banks and businesses injected that money into the economy through the form of new home loans. And when did they do that? They did that after 1975, after the last foreclosure was sold off. We had this inflation in the second half of the 70s, and that's what we're having. That's what we're having now in the 2010s. In 2015, they'll solve the last foreclosure, and then the businesses and the banks, to get a higher interest rate, they'll look for that stable investment, which will be real estate, and they will loan more, and the injecting of money into the economy will cause high inflation. So we see that printing money doesn't cause inflation. Giving the money to the banks and the businesses doesn't cause inflation, but injecting that money into the economy through the form of new home loans will. So this is the main reason why we will have inflation in home prices and why real estate is actually the best place to have your money from 2014 on, 2015, 16. Especially 2016 on, there will be high inflation. So this is looking at the 1970s debunks the idea that you have to have jobs to qualify for loans for real estate to go up. This shows us quite the opposite, is that it also depends on the law of supply and demand, and when you increase the money supply, you increase the demand in real estate because it's an inflationary hedge. Hope you like the video. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.